And we are live. Welcome to episode 21 of Shifty Perspective. In this episode, we are joined by my good friend, scientist Carl H. Smith. Carl was the first ever guest on Shifty Perspective, so it's great to have him back. We will be going live straight away, where we hope to delve deeper into the abyss that is existence and covering a range of interesting topics without any kind of real structure, I guess, just like last time. So, well, last time I saw you was a while ago, and we did speak briefly the other day, but everything good with you?
Yeah, well, as best as can be expected in this insane scenario, but I think it's revealing a lot, isn't it, in terms of the sort of the 90% of bullshit that we were all sort of doing has fallen away, and then we're now realizing the essential nature of reality as much as we can, and I think it's a real time for deep reflection, integration, time with your loved ones, looking into each other's eyes, and all the sort of the daily distractions. I mean, even though we are still hijacked and our attention is completely not our own, and I think that's the big problem with consciousness, that we are. And when you lack attention, you lack your own consciousness, and I think that's what we need to work on a little bit more, and be careful what we take in as nourishment in terms of inputs. And one of my friends actually said to me the other day, he said he was trying to write a book, and his thing was no new inputs, and I think that was a beautiful thing. I mean, if I could do that, I would probably be very successful at getting my books written and all the rest of it. But it's like I'm a big archivist, and I'm constantly recording everything, and I'm realizing only recently that if you're going to record your life, you need to have another life to look at it. Do you know what I mean? You don't have time to look back ever. Like, that's why 70% of digital photos are never looked at again, because you're just you're always in a forward motion, right? So you're just creating more garbage, more sort of clutter, more sort of noise. Because I think that not only do our possessions hold space in our mental space, but also our thoughts and the recordings of our experiences are also more clutter, and it's like my friend Jack Alog said, you're bloated, you're super bloated, and I see you've just got into collecting art because you've got a nice stable address now, and I'm a mad art.
First time ever.
You know what I mean? It's a beautiful thing to have these beautiful objects around us, but it's like, you absolutely realize, behind me you can see a big record collection, got like 10,000 records, and it's like, you realize, you do the maths, you live for 30,000 days, and that's 1,000 months, and we think we have the audacity to think we own anything, even our own bodies aren't our own. It's like we're borrowing everything, and like the Egyptians knew, you can't take anything with you. Although my experiences of sort of touching on near-death experiences and life reviews have sort of made me realize that actually you get your life back as a product that you can infinitely review, in order to learn, because I think we're in a massive learning laboratory.
And do you think those objects are still part of you and a part of that, and because they all build your experiences? So
no, it's a very interesting question. I mean, I think I had a life review where did I tell you about that? I don't think we talked about that last time, right?
Life review.
A life review. It's a very common bit of phenomenology. So a lot of people talk about, in a near-death experience, your life flashing before you, and mine wasn't a flash. This was like my entire life in reverse. So I stopped living forward. No new inputs, right? I no longer had this new experience. I was literally living in these episodes of my past, but my consciousness was completely normal, right? I was completely it was a sober experience. I was very sober, but my experience was going backwards. So I had these whole episodes where it was cinematic quality, like nothing like, a dream or an ayahuasca experience, which is very dreamlike. This was like crystal clear sort of visions of my past, and it was like nothing was changed. The coffee stain on the table was there. You know, it was literally I was stepping back into that time. But what was interesting is because previous in my life I'd
Was
had an
this?
out of body. Go on.
Oh, sorry. Where was this? Like, where did this happen? Was this through meditation, or was this like in a dream state? If you
I was
said you
actually
weren't
in
on ayahuasca or anything.
I was in a club. But yeah, it's a long story.
Okay.
I'm not going to go into the too much details. But I was listening to DJ Stingray in this amazing club called Corsica Studios in Elephant and Castle, and yeah,
Yeah.
it was a very very intense. So basically, I had this inkling. So you know, I was literally in a double consciousness. You know, I'm a big sort of proponent of this double consciousness
Hmm.
idea. So this is because of experience, right? I've had these experiences that have then pushed my thinking, and the double consciousness thing sprang from this early experience of a life review. So I was in my current consciousness, but I was also in the consciousness going backwards, right? And the first thing I thought of to try in this experience, because immediately I was like, what the hell is going on here? I tried leaving my body because I'd had an out of body experience, God, 13 years previous to that.
Hmm.
I kind of had that as a methodology that I could apply in whether it's in a dream space, in a life review, in a lucid dream, whatever. Because I've had it happen
Yeah.
to me, and again, that was an absolutely non-drug experience, one of the most profound ones of my life. When I'm standing up, had an out of body experience, and the in the life review. So immediately I tried leaving my body and I went into wood. I went into a table and I was like, I'm going to try and go in that table. So I went into the table and I became wood consciousness. So I was in 3 levels of consciousness, and the wood and the table was fully conscious as well, right? So I'm having the experience of being the table, being me back then, and being me at the present moment in 3 level. And so I'm
And
now
you were
parallel.
still yourself in the present.
Yeah. So I was parallel processing. I was like, and I'll talk a little bit about why this is interesting from what I've learned about idealism and Bernardo Kastrup's work. So basically, let me talk through the experience and then move on to what it could have been. So I'd then gone into the wood, became the table, and I then was like, okay, so I can go into anything. So I realized I could go into any object. And I was only able to access things that I'd lived, right? So I'd gone through my life. I'm not having any new inputs, but what was new was the ability to go into other people and be them and me and me. So I went into, I'd been with this girl 2 years before in Berlin, and by mistake, we've only been together like a month or something. She got pregnant by mistake, and basically, yeah, I was like, wow, I'm capable of being a dad, right? So she phones me up on the Tuesday. She phones me up. She says, I'm pregnant. Abortion's on Tuesday. Puts the phone down. I'm like, what the fuck? I can't do anything about it. So there was no conversation at all. It was
Yeah.
like, this is happening. So I went over immediately. I was in London. She was in Berlin. So I went over, and she had the pill. She took a pill. I mean, she's only a week long pregnant. She has
Hmm.
the abortion into the toilet. So in this life review, I'm like, oh my God, I can go into her. So I went into her body. I felt entirely what it was like to be pregnant. I felt the doubts. I felt the doubts that she was having about whether to get rid of it or not. And I didn't have any clue in reality that she was even doubting it for a second. But in this life review, I felt her. I felt what it was like to be pregnant, even if it was a very new pregnancy. And then I was like, oh my God, I can go into the womb and experience the 4th level of parallel consciousness and experience the abortion. So I experienced the abortion at a cellular level, and I was in 4 parallel consciousnesses going in this like waterfall into the toilet. So I was like in her body, I was in the fetus, I was in, the embryo rather, because I felt like I was able, because I know that, for instance, I believe that there's a certain amount of pregnancy where the soul hasn't entered the body yet. I mean, some people would disagree, but we know that DMT enters the body around the 49th day of conception, which is when the sex is decided. So it strikes me, if DMT is introduced, the sex is decided,
And
then
consciousness of sorts is.
yes, the spirit enters the body. So at that point, I was just cellular. But I was in the consciousness of that cell having the abortion, and it was like, what the fuck? So I was like, and then I was like, I went and tried everything else. I went into books, became the author. I went into films and became all the actors. So it was like how I describe it is that in normal life, we're very much in point of view. You know, if
Hmm.
we have empathy, we may be able to empathize with another, but we're encased, we're imprisoned in our own perspective, right? And it's amazing when you fall in love because you suddenly have this much closer. It's like the veil is much thinner because you're in love with
Yes.
somebody. You feel them. You know, you can feel them, but you're not them. You're never them. But in the death state, you
Nope.
get to be. What I've realized is we're driving the point of view in life in order to access the field of view in death, which is why I suspect death is much bigger than uh, this reduction of consciousness. In fact, I think it's a much bigger expansion of consciousness.
You so you do believe that there is still a consciousness as an individual, or do you think that you go into everything and therefore you lose your individual consciousness and you just become part of the universe?
Tell you one thing to watch if you haven't seen it already. Midnight Gospel, episode 3. So Midnight Gospel is this big sort of psychedelic, bit like Adventure Time, um, Rick and Morty, on that sort of ilk.
Oh, it's what's his name? The comedian. I
Yeah,
can't remember his name
that's
again.
right. That's right.
Duncan Trussell.
That's right. That's right. So episode 3 is narrated by a guy that was put in prison, used magic to cope, and maybe even to get out. He got released, and he wrote this amazing book about how magic kept him sane in prison. Magic with a K, and
Hmm.
and literally he talks about the solar body and how what we're actually here to do is become sort of diamond souls. And actually, I think once you build the solar body through a lot of practice, a lot of that you can see it with these Tibetan masters that sort of go into some sort of suspended animation. Even their bodies don't really decay. Um, in life, that there's a whole other story. But the the solar body is a way of maintaining your individuality even when you go into the non-duality. So I'm always fascinated by this difference between the non-duality and the duality and the sort of the life and the death. And but I'm very conscious that I've had many lives, and I think that the reincarnation is absolutely a mechanism that the universe uses, and death and rebirth and all the rest of it are super um, sort of absolutely necessary for the functioning of the universe. And I think
But do you believe? Oh, sorry. Can you just when you say you believe in reincarnation, do you mean do you believe in direct reincarnation, or do you believe in the concept of reincarnation of when we die, we're reborn as something else because we break down and that becomes something else because you can't destroy
yeah,
energy, or
I,
or
I'm
it,
it's a
yeah.
work in progress. My thinking on this, I think that
Oh,
absolutely
okay.
there's a ginormous cosmic washing machine, and
Hmm.
maybe without training, you are born as a rat or as a snake, or maybe it's only humans only become humans, or I've no idea. But I really don't think that the human experience is limited to the human experience. I think either we evolve through all the other animals to become human, or maybe maybe a bird is superior to being human, and that's kind of where we're headed if we evolve in the right way. Who knows? I think also it's maybe that we're in this third dimension, whereas when we look at the plant medicines, they seem to take us into different forms of relationship with light.
Hmm.
In this dimension, we're certainly having a relationship with the light, as in the light source is the sun. The sun lights upon us and shines upon us and gives us energy, gives us life. Whereas if you look at ayahuasca and everything else, you see these luminous beings. And then if you look at 5-MeO-DMT, you literally become light itself. So whether you call them dimensions, I know dimensions is a horrible and problematic term, but different relationships, different relations with light itself may be what reincarnation is. And that we go through these relations with light until we become the light body. And that's when you get all of your memories back, whether it's memories of being a bird, memories of being all sorts of animals, every memory of being human. And but yeah, I would love to know more about this solar body idea and learn from the Tibetan masters and learn about dying consciously, which is what a lucid dream is like, or an out of body experience. You fall asleep consciously, which is a bit like dying consciously. I think that when we pass over, we're sort of moving into
Yeah.
another form of consciousness, much like we die every night with these mini deaths.
Do you find your opinion works alongside or clashes with your scientific work? Because
It's a big paradox. I mean, absolutely, great question. I
yeah.
think that a lot of people are warm to me because I'm foot in both camps. You know, I've had a lot of experiences that I cannot deny, and lots of them have been, the most profound ones have been without any substance involved. So therefore, they're way more scientifically interesting from the science perspective, because people are saying, what caused that? Was it endogenous? Was it like an intervention? You know, and I'm also a computer scientist, and I'm an academic. So, you know, I just did a talk a couple of days ago for UCL, and even the people, you know, even though it's the Psychedelic Society of the University College London, they're still going, oh wow, we've never had anyone talking about their own experiences before. Even though they're the people studying DMT and doing it scientifically, they're looking at the sort of the remnants of the brain activity. They're not talking about the sort of the, you know, it's the qualitative and the quantitative, right? They've got the quantitative down. The qualitative stuff they tend to veer away from because it's problematic. They don't want to ruin their reputations. They don't want people thinking that they're crazy. You know, I don't mind people thinking that I'm crazy.
That's what I was thinking.
I've got nothing to lose, and I'm a firm believer that it's these abilities to share openly that will push the science forward. And even people like Chris Timmerman, who you've got on your show next week, he's very much about the trip report. He's very much about the qualitative and not just the quantitative. And I think it's the marriage between the two. It's the marriage between the science and the mystical, or the science and the, you know, this stuff that we've already learned from the East. And what's amazing is all the quantum physics, all the stuff that we're finding, you know, in this quantitative way is being, you know, we're looking back, like David Bohm, again, an amazing film from David Bohm.
There's a crossover,
yeah. There's a huge, not only a small crossover. This is like, holy shit, these, you know, people in the East were talking about this thousands of years ago. We should take note. And
do you think? Do you think it's? Oh, sorry. Oh, there's a bit of a delay. That's why.
Yeah, there is a delay. Yeah, that's fine.
Talking over you then.
I was just going to finish that point. So hold on to what you were going to say. But what I've realized, and a lot of the work, and even being with Chris actually recently, the last couple of days, you know, I'm very much looking at what technology is doing in terms of this ability to upload consciousness. You know, there's huge billions going into this research. You know, can we upload consciousness into the digital realms? And after I came to Holland and spent some time with you, I went home. I don't know if I even told you this. I had this incredible, my first lucid dream ever, right? And I think I mentioned it recently, but I literally, I had this, you know, lying in bed, my consciousness, for some reason, I'm having this very strange sensation where I'm tipping back into my own consciousness. And I was like, I pushed it. I was like, let's see what this is, right? So I pushed it a little bit harder. I didn't try and stop it. I pushed it a little bit more. And then I went into, and I had sleep paralysis for the first time in my life upon entering sleep. So I'm trying to raise my arm to sort of see if I'm
terrifying.
It was pretty terrifying, and I couldn't move my arm. So I'm like, oh my god, I'm having. And I was aware that I'm having sleep paralysis, and then suddenly I'm in this new world. I'm in this holographic reality. Everything's made of light, very like an ayahuasca journey or DMT journey, but I'm seeing. I'm made of light. I'm seeing that the buildings I'm in are made of light. And then, you know, I have this horrific 6-hour lucid dream, like intense, like completely hyper real, like more real than this reality. I'm being tortured in these groups. So it's like a group of people torturing me, like amputating stuff and like super dark, like really horrendous. And I'm like, I'm unable to stop it, and I'm unable to come out of it, and I'm literally conscious of what's happening. And again, it's in this episodic section, so it's one to the next, and I can't feel any pain because I haven't properly like got that. Don't know. Maybe I was protected in the sense I wouldn't feel the pain, but the fact that I was visually seeing it was so traumatic, pure trauma. And I was like, at the end of the 6 hours, I was like, fuck this, I'm going to jump out the window. So I go for a window, right? And I'm in this sort of weird hotel. I jump out of the window and I'm falling. And it feels like gravity's normal. I've never jumped out of a window before, but I feel like finally I'm going to die.
What you imagine it would feel like.
Yeah, I'm going to release from this. And I can see this like green neon tower. And I'm like literally falling to the ground. And I'm like just thankful, really thankful that I'm going to be out of this situation. And and again, remember, this is hyper real, so I'm not thinking this, I'm in a dream. I don't know I've fallen into a dream. I don't know anything about where I am or what it is. But as I come to the ground, I sort of slow down, and it's something like I've seen out of the matrix. It goes, zoop, and I sort of slow down just as I'm about to hit the ground, and then I just stop and I stand up, and I see this witch-like woman with white hair in front of me, like as far away from you as you are now. I know you're in hyperspace, but the cyberspace.
What it seems like, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like literally, oh my God, like, and she just says one thing to me. She shakes her finger like this, and she says, "There's no death here." And I'm like, fuck. So then I continue to be tortured, and unfortunately I've had my 6 hours. It's completely real time, and I force myself awake, and I'm like, wow, like trauma, real trauma for days after that, like way more traumatic than anything I've experienced in real life. Questioning it, what it was, what the hell happened? Like, was it real? Did I just visit someplace? And then amazingly, 6 days after the experience, I go to do this trial, a technology trial called ISNIS. And ISNIS is an amazing piece of VR that's come out of Bristol. David Glowacki produced it, and he launched it at Breaking Convention, biggest psychedelic conference in Europe, and he did it as a sort of a distributed experience. So I meet this woman called Rachel, and Rachel amazingly was the woman in my dream, and I'm like, oh my God,
with the white hair.
Yeah, and I'm like, she has the white hair, she's got the same face. I'm like, what the hell? You're the woman. And it sounds really corny when you say, "Oh,
you're the woman of my dreams."
Exactly. But this was the fact, Literally, I couldn't believe it, and I was like, and then after talking to her for a few minutes, I realized why I had that dream, and there's a couple of reasons. I think primarily because she's a hyperhumanist like myself. She's working on using technology not as a dependency, as something that we become a cyborg with, but actually something that enables us to have a new sense, have a new skill, that we then remove the technology, because the technology has just been a catalyst for us getting this new ability. And then a bit like stabilizers on your bike, we probably talked about it last time. Right? So once you've got the skill, you remove the stabilizers, remove the technology. She's exactly on that page, and I was like, thank God I've met another one of that idea of hyperhumanism. And then I was like, got thinking a little bit more about the dream, because the dream was a transhumanist sort of, it was a transhumanist vision of uploading consciousness, where you cannot die, right? So the caveat is that I realize now how sacred death is. Not that I don't fear death anymore, which is what some of the previous experiences have given me, some of the journeys I've had. But now I'm not only not fearing death, I'm finding it absolutely sacred and a part of life that we should never try and remove, because not only is it super rude to nature, it's like, fuck you, nature, I'm just going to like be rude. And like, it's a bit like eating too much at your dinner, right? You're just like, you have a certain amount of dinner and everyone needs to be fed. And like, and in fact, all the people that are trying to like be born through now are not going to be able to be born if it's there's too many people here already. Whatever. It's like there's only a certain amount of resources on planet
But when
Earth.
is the point of?
Well, I think it's
like when is that point?
That's a whole other question. I think life extension with quality is absolutely something we should be aware of. But let's make sure that we're starting to use nature to look after nature, be stewards of nature, not just complete like hijacked zombies that aren't even aware of their own inner world, let alone the world that we're in. You know what I mean? That's for me that's when you deserve to stay here longer. When you're contributing, when you're helping the ecosystems, when you realize you're part of a nested ecology, and all the rest of it. So I think where was I? So the transhumanist vision. And then Chris, again, talking to Chris Zimmerman 2 days ago, he's like, because he knows about my diary project, right? So I'm writing this diary. I've been writing it for 30 years. I've got like everything written down, my entire life. And I'm writing
I remember seeing
3 levels, right? So I'm writing it from content, what I did, context, what I felt, concepts, what I thought, right? And I'm writing it 5 minutes a day, and I've got my notebook, which is for ideation. This is all the concepts. And then I've got my electronic diary, which is what I've done, like everything I've done. every film I've ever watched, every medicine I've ever taken, all the dosages, all the, it's literally, I've got this archive. And then I've also got mood. So I've got all the photographs, all the, I've got access to these three aspects, which is what, it's the being, it's the doing, and it's the thinking. And that data set for an AI.
That's an amazing idea.
Yeah. So that, but you say that, but then what I've done is actually I've built this artificial consciousness, right? Because I can feed all of that data, that 30-year data set, into an AI. Most data sets, most AI data sets, like are just a bot. So your messenger data can be fed into a bot, into an AI engine, right? And you can actually create this neural network of all of your conversations. But that's just your conversations with another person or whatever. I've got all of this, and I've got all that as well. So I can feed all of that data, all my social media data. And we know about social media that one of the big dangers is that your social media knows you better than your mum. So Chris was like, "Oh, Carl, maybe the real reason you had that lucid dream is because you are endangered of. You're the first person to be able to build an AI of yourself that has the being, the thinking, and the doing, and you're the one that's being warned because you have the power to actually do it, and your plan is to do it. So maybe think carefully."
Yeah, would you?
Well, now I've had that dream. I'm like, shit, maybe I will like build an artificial consciousness of myself that will live on beyond me and won't be able to die. So either I find a mechanism to kill it, give it its own volition, give it its own agency that it can abort. But then Chris also says, well, but you now maybe have built something that can do something that hasn't been done, that is able to extend life, and maybe you should be looking at it. I always try, whenever I come up with an argument, I always try and counter my own argument because I think that's what good research is.
Yeah.
So I'm in this sort of limbo of not knowing and being very conscious that a bit like Brave New World, the TV series. Have you seen it yet?
I have not seen it yet. No,
Yeah.
you said for me to watch it.
I do need to get you on that because now I've been invited to do a TED talk at Oxford Uni, and that's going to be in February.
On Brave New World, on Aldous Huxley's novel, or
the whole theme is Brave New World, and what my title of my talk I've actually decided is going to be How to Escape Brave New World, because the three pillars of Brave New World are, the first one is everyone's high. Soma, right? Everyone's high. If you're not high, you go to jail. It's illegal not to be high. And I don't think it's high as in the sort of things that are nice and interesting and really push us. I think it's like the SSRI kind of high, the numb high, where you're actually all your levels are monitored, and everyone has to be at a certain level. And it's not your choice what you're on. It's like you're given the medicine, blah blah. So generally not a good. Second principle is polyamory. Like, it's the law. If you try and be monogamous, you're put in jail. There's no one-on-one relationships anymore. That's done. Everyone is owned by everyone, and that's it. That's the rule. And then the third principle is everyone's wearing mixed reality, right? So everyone's wearing contact lens. In the contact lens, that means you can be seen through, heard through, and not only that, but it's like an organic computer. So it actually feels you. It can feel your affective state, and it can measure.
Wow.
So everyone's felt. Not only is everyone owned by everyone, but everyone is felt.
So you can't hide anything.
No privacy anymore. That was the basic principle of Brave New World.
Yeah.
Same 1984. No privacy, and you can see that's where we're going. This is a very powerful series because it shows you the trajectory of where we're all going if none of us do anything about it. And I think that so much of it's in place already, especially with the lockdown, that we're seeing the matrix being built around us. Everything's going digital. All the supply chains are going digital, no matter what the business. In fact, I'm being asked to digitize all sorts of supply chains. And it's super scary because people are very, very, very lazy. And they're also very, I'm running online parties, with the Co-Reality Collective. We've been doing it since lockdown. It's fantastic in the sense that everyone feels like they're connecting, that they have an outlet, that they have something to do with their Saturday nights. But the danger is that we get used to being
norm.
Yeah, it becomes the norm. People were like, I don't need to go out anymore. I can just press a button. Just like they can press a button to get a girlfriend,
Hmm.
press the button to get a hotel, press the button to get a taxi, press the button to get a job. It's like we need to build friction back in because life's become so convenient, and
Yeah.
we're complete obsessed monsters of convenience, which is why we're so easily manipulated and why we're so easily hijacked, because we just constantly like, just give me the convenient option. You know, I'm a lazy human. It's Wally
And then we
World.
just follow along and do whatever we're told. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So
It's interesting. I would say that you mentioned Brave New World and also 1984.
yeah,
Those were actually two of the things that I jotted down. I don't make many notes in the podcast, but those were just
yeah,
two of the things that I put down because I think we really are going into a state where both of those novels are extremely relevant. In fact, probably now more than ever.
yeah, exactly. And how prophetic to have that. Um,
Hmm.
I think so. What I've realized from watching Brave New World is that I'm absolutely implicated in two of those areas. Because I'm doing a lot of like the Soma research. I'm looking at 5-MeO-DMT with Imperial, and I'm very much looking at mixed reality. And even though I'm pushing tech for good, I'm constantly saying let's go the hyperhumanist route and not the transhumanist route. It's like pushing against the tide. You know, it's like the the amount of people doing transhumanism now is ginormous, and there's very few people looking at things the way I am and trying to push and trying to create groups that push this. But I don't think it's too late. I think that absolutely now's the time to be pushing back and to say, look,
Yeah.
I really think that, and you can see it with like films like The Social Dilemma being pushed. Social Dilemma, again, you know, it's the people that have produced this hijacking that are now saying, oh, maybe we fucked up, and they're you know, creating a new path, a new
Yeah.
career path for themselves, saying actually it was our fault, but you know, at least we're telling you now. So I think building
Is
on,
that enough though? I
no,
mean,
it's not. It's not enough, and that's the point. So it's like it's a bit like Greta saying, you know, the world's being destroyed, but let's look at, you know, we know that, but we need people with solutions. We need people that are actually like looking at it from a very broad church and saying, sure, this is what's happened. So we kind of need both. We need to have the reflection. We need to know that this is happening, but we also need to know what to do next. And we need to, and it's so difficult because we're in a post-truth era. We're of a we're of a world where there is no common ground anymore. Half the people think we're living in a conspiracy. Half the people think
hmm.
it's natural. I mean, my even my own understanding is changing rapidly because you don't know what to trust. You don't know where the good
No.
sources of information are, and
Yeah.
that's
Well,
perfect
how do
for
you verify its authenticity? It's just,
exactly. So I really think that we are going to go through this, no matter how horribly painful it is. The old system is dying. It's sort of like you can feel the noise of the old system dying as it's dying, and we're all
hmm.
scared. But I think that it has to pass. It has to go in order for us to build something else. And I absolutely believe that we will. There will be there will be another human. There will be a future human. And I've just seen this incredible. I mean, I recommend this amazing book. Chris Backer wrote a book called LSD and the Mind of the Universe. Diamonds from Heaven
Yeah.
is the name of the book. And he's just did this amazing podcast a couple of days ago. And in that book and in that talk, he takes megadoses of LSD over 23 years, I believe, and he took something like 70 doses of high dose LSD, so 500 mics or and above. And he did it
Wow.
completely scientifically. His wife looked after him on that 30-year journey. Um, he literally went through, and I mean honestly, it's just
Oh, I've lost your sound. Uh, nope. You're muted. It says.
sorry. Yeah, no, that was
It's okay.
my mistake. So let me just see if I can. So he talks about this going through the personal mind, right? Going through crossing this boundary of
Hmm.
birth and death, and then he entered. And this was over multiple journeys himself. And then he moved into the collective mind, where he went through this ocean of suffering. He went into something called deep time, and then he had an initiation, a personal initiation with the universe, um, in which he passed over into the archetypal mind, where he found these beings. He found like what Plato talks about, where he talks about the the forms and the the original forms. And then he moved into something even more amazing. He talked about this causal oneness. Then he talked about diamond luminosity and the birth of the future human. And for me, this is absolutely about this hyperhumanist idea that
Yeah.
we will live on. And absolutely, we're going through a mass initiation now. But he said that the universe, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing. He said that the universe is a sort of a laboratory or a way of manufacturing diamond souls. And I think that that's what the reincarnation is, that we're constantly evolving, constantly learning from our fuck ups. And even in my life review, I I experienced what I'd done to people as them and me at the same time. And I think that even though that may have just been a near death experience, I had free will and I could choose who I went
Hmm.
into. I think in the death state, you don't choose. You absolutely experience what you've done to somebody as them and you at the same time. So there's, you can't hide from any of you. And when you come back from that sort of journey, you radically know that I am both of us, and so are you. And you don't hide. You don't want
Sounds
to
a
hide.
lot like iboga.
Yeah, exactly. It does.
Similar
Yeah, I've
similar things happen.
never done Iboga, but I absolutely think that that is potentially a similar medicine. This is why you stop abusing heroin or whatever. Because you
Hmm.
realize what you're doing not just to yourself, but to your family, to your loved ones,
Yeah.
and you actually feel their pain, you feel their hurt, and you feel their concern for you. And I think that's the empathy engine right there. That's the reason why these
Yeah.
medicines are so transformative. And you don't need the soma, you don't need the constant numbing of an SSRI, of an antidepressant daily, because you have a
Hmm.
one mega dose realization where you get the overview effect, and you're sort of no longer driving in the car, you're driving outside of the car, and you're seeing the backstage, you're seeing what you're trying to hide from yourself all the time, because we're constantly
Yeah.
like playing ourselves.
I've actually got a question that's just popped up from on the chat. There's
Yeah,
people asking away, which is
yeah.
welcome. Anyone else listening, feel free. That what are your thoughts on about this being a high possibility that we actually live in a simulation, and how does that fit in with what we've essentially just spoken about? Because that could be
Yeah,
a distinct possibility.
yeah, that came across quite heavily in the Chris Backer talk. I hope they put it out because it was just the most enlightening and inspiring, and made me think, yeah, maybe we are going through a death experience right now, and maybe death isn't as bad and as evil as we all been trained to believe, because we live in a capitalist, materialist world where they want us to spend as much money as we can and work as hard as we can before we leave the mortal coil. Yeah, again, verdict's still out. I think that we absolutely are. Um, when we're doing the virtual reality work, when we're creating these simulated worlds, and we're getting so close to creating lifelike humans, and
Hmm.
what's to say that we haven't done this a million times before? Maybe we're building on previous pandemics where we had to go into the virtual, and that's
Yeah.
maybe what we are in now. That we're in a projected universe from somewhere else that is got diseased or lost its ability to function, and maybe exactly what I'm doing with the digital diary is what I've done before many times, just to escape a
Hmm.
reality that was no longer habitable.
Well, that could make sense as well with the whole with the dream you were talking about, with the lucid dream, about that being part of the reality is, if it's all a simulation, that dream itself was a created part of, well, essentially created by somebody else in this cyberspace within, and it's just layers upon layers of the simulation.
Yeah, it's an onion. It's a big onion, and I think that
Yeah.
that and I was saying it again in this UCL talk, that I feel as if when I do a plant medicine journey, I tend to go through space. I feel like I've gone through into
Hmm.
deep time, like he's talked about, like your sense of time dissolves, and all of these things that may be belief systems that we believe so readily. Like we believe we should age, and therefore we age. And it's like, I'm like, I'm a very big believer that the body, to counter my own argument just then, the body is absolutely a fragile system. It definitely, I've got friends that are really suffering at the moment with cancer and all sorts of things. But the mind is infinite. I think that the mind is
Hmm.
infinite, and therefore we can heal the body with the mind if we allow it to be infinite, and if we allow it not to be boxed in, and if we allow it not to be brainwashed by
Yeah.
the mainstream media. And living in fear is the biggest thing we have to overcome. And I think if you listen to people like Chris, and you have these, if he's gone on this collective journey for all of us, and this incredible 30-year research, he's not interested in doing this stuff recreationally. He did it just for the research, just for
Yeah.
the science. And I think that's my camp as well. I'm not interested in, I want to explore what is this infinite mind. um, and yeah, like the whole thing about what David Bohm has taught us with this implicate and explicit order. He's teaching that there is no empty space. This whole thing about the atom being 99.99999% empty. He's saying no, it's full. It's absolutely full. And actually, what you really realize is that it's even if it's invisible to us with our brains that filter out so much of what's there. 1% of the
Hmm.
visual spectrum we see, we probably see much less. A friend of mine was saying, no, it's not nearly as much as 1% of the visual spectrum that we see. So we are being kept
That's
from
crazy.
the truth. We're not seeing reality. We're seeing a very small fraction of it. And I think the tools that we have in the toolbox, whether it's the technologies, whether it's the medicines, whether it's body technology, whether it's meditation, breath work, you name it. I mean, the things that I've got out of breath work are far
Yeah.
superior to any drug that I've ever taken. And that's your own innate human, hyperhuman ability. And if you don't, and we don't even breathe properly normally. Like I've read recently that we stop breathing when we read email. You don't breathe normally because you're constantly,
When we really, really,
yeah, like it interrupts your breathing, your breath, your flow.
that's
You're
so true.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And just knowing that is half
I'm
the battle.
terrible for it. I hold my breath. Yeah.
We all do, mate. We all shallow breathe unless you're
What
conscious. Yeah, go ahead.
funny that you say when you mentioned about like meditation and using these tools, I actually think that using plant medicine or drugs or psychedelics is also just they're just tools to access the same states that we're accessing through meditation. And the thing is, that's all like our alchemical vessel. We're just changing the chemical reactions that are happening in our brain, allowing different parts of the brain to communicate and allow us to open up different fields of perception. So
Mm.
the kind of limit is, well, there isn't a limit. That's the crazy thing about it.
Yeah, and I really think, like I was
Uh,
saying with the Holotechnica stuff, it's the combinations, because we've got
yes.
whole new sciences being birthed, because we've got all these modalities, we've got all these different ecstatic dance, we've got fasting, we have dark immersion, we have sensory deprivation, and these can all be just foundations that we then build upon doing the meditation, doing the hypnosis, doing the breath work, and then we can do some VR
Hmm.
experiences. Maybe then we do some magic mushrooms, we do some whatever. But it's the stacking, it's the ordering of these combinations, and I think magic is revealed inside
Yeah.
these combinations. And there's people out there that are doing combinations we've never heard of. So it's a case of like crowdsourcing that, making citizen science frameworks available so we know what's safe to do, what's really unsafe. I mean, for
Yeah.
instance, there's loads of breathwork classes happening at the moment. Holotropic breathwork, you need a sitter. Just like you need a sitter when you're doing an entheogen. You need somebody there to look after you. You can go really deep into this stuff and it can be very traumatic. You can come out and you need somebody there looking out for you to make sure that you're not doing anything stupid. And I think that that's the thing. We need frameworks of use. We need to understand. And Stellark, a brilliant artist who put an ear on, grafted an ear on his arm, and then allowed the internet, his world to be heard through this ear, and you could plug into his ear through the internet. As he says, we have a biological system that is very much has limits. The mind has no limits.
Yeah.
So let's utilize that and then combine the two. And this is making me think now. And I think that, yeah, let's combine this infinite potential with the body that is limited, but maybe we can make the body, stronger. We can make it less limited because of that understanding and that real belief.
Yeah, we can remove limitations, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the ultimate combination is the body and the mind, and they are the one thing. And whatever, I think that's. But for me, holotechnica, which is when we're doing these combinations, and myself and my good partner Jose, we're working on this academy because we want to bring in things like, I've just been doing this Finders course for the last 17 weeks, and that's purely about meditation practice. So Jeffrey Martin, amazing character, he basically took 1,000 different meditation techniques and then collapsed those into the best 26 or 24. And then over a 17-week period, you try 24 different meditation techniques. Every 3 days, you try a different one. And it's an online course, super clever of him because he's, it's an expensive course, but you're giving them your data. So you do measures all the time. Every 3 days, you need to write a measure, which is a questionnaire saying what happened, did it fulfill this fundamental well-being, which is all we're all searching for. So he gets your data, he gets your money, and it's all automated. So it's an automated course. He doesn't even, you never meet him. He's just videos.
Wow.
So it's like amazing. Like, but also we do have groups. We do like work with little groups, so that you do have that contact. And I'm not saying that a fully automated course is the way to go, and I certainly wouldn't do that myself. And in fact, you can't do that in Europe because you'd have to pay VAT on every single country that would join the course. In America, I imagine you can get away with it because they have very different laws and all the rest of it. But
could it be donations?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, he definitely isn't open for donations, but we could certainly.
No, I mean for you to get around the VAT thing.
Oh, I mean, I haven't gone that far down. I haven't gone that far down thinking about it. But yeah, I mean, I know your work and your idea of producing, going out and actually helping out the people that are near death or whatever. I mean, one of the big things for me is conscious dying and helping people come to terms with death because it isn't nearly as scary as it is seen to be. And I think that if we look at people like Zach Bush, amazing scientist and doctor, clinician, who is in the IC units. I think I maybe even mentioned this last time on the podcast. He's literally resuscitating people. He's bringing back COVID patients, and invariably they're saying to him, "Why did you bring me back?" Because they're going into this light and they're seeing the other side, and they're all saying, "I don't want to be here. I want to be there." And he says that it's not a contraction of consciousness, it's a ginormous expansion of consciousness. And I think, of course, we don't want to leave our loved ones behind, but what if our loved ones, and what if we are absorbed into our loved ones? What if we continue to understand everything from this world, but we also have access to another world?
I mean, it could be a DMT trip, though. I mean, there is that the thing they're experiencing could possibly be them having a huge dose of DMT at the end.
Yeah, and another person that's really interesting in this area is Anthony Peake. I mean, he's got this amazing sort of working hypothesis, which is called cheating the ferryman. And cheating the ferryman is basically, that DMT trip is a time valve, right? You like with my near-death experience, my life review, I experienced my entire life in reverse in 1 hour. So maybe DMT is involved. Maybe again, we don't know if DMT is involved in the lungs. We certainly know that there's not enough endogenous DMT to produce a DMT trip, but maybe upon death there is. Who knows?
Yeah.
But what's interesting in his hypothesis is that, of course, maybe he talks about the virgin life, the original life, and then other lives after that are your DMT infusion on death, where you experience your entire life in reverse, and therefore you have, and then at the end of that death, you have another DMT release, and then it continues. It's like a recursive. So you have endless lives, sort of digital or chemical lives after your virgin life. And Nietzsche actually talks about this as well, in the sense that he talks about the eternal recurrence. and how we don't live
Yeah.
in reincarnation. We live the same life, like Groundhog Day. Every single life is the same life,
Hmm.
but you have chances of changing it. He says, let's make sure that you're living your infinite life every single day. Because if it's true, if his hypothesis is correct, then we may as well live every day as if it's infinity, because it is, and therefore do your best
Yeah.
every
And you
single
want to
day.
live at the best then.
Yeah, enjoy it every single day.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're going to create. If you have those days where you're just completely not into it, or you're completely lazy, or you're completely whatever, you're just like you're wasting that day forever, not just a day.
I'll be honest. I've had a pretty close near-death experience, and for me, it was terrifying. It was just one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me, and
Yeah,
I nearly drowned, and
right.
I was rescued by somebody. I fell off
Wow.
I got stuck under a waterfall actually, and
Shit.
I jumped over. I was jumping into the. We were jumping down this waterfall really big, and somebody warned me. They said, "Don't jump this route because it's really dangerous. There's cross currents."
Yeah.
I jumped stupidly. I wanted to climb the highest and jump the highest. And I jumped into the wrong part, and I was just pulled under and just smashed against this small cave where the water. Every time there was about enough for me to stick my nose out of the water, and then it would just drag me under again. So I just gasping for air, and I was terrified. I was screaming for my life, and like I never thought I would do that. I thought, I would just, if something happens, I'm just going to live with it. But I just was not ready to die, and
Yeah, of
it
course.
was. I was puking up as I was like gasping going down. I was just puking, so I was taking on so much water, and luckily somebody saved me. My friends all thought I was joking. They could hear me screaming every so often, and they at first thought I would like kind of laugh at it, joking. I'm a strong swimmer, and actually, a friend of mine realized and jumped in himself and managed to grab me and swim out with me. And I was at the point where I was passing out, and I was dying. Like I felt myself. Yeah, that was the closest I've ever come, and it was terrifying. And time definitely, it's strange. It's time. I can't say time actually slowed, but the whole everything just goes and whizzes by and whirs, and it just gets distorted. It's really like really for me. It is like a trip. Like
Yeah.
things get distorted. It's like it's really fast that it's happening, but it's also really slow. Um,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, but I mean, it's different for everybody. For obviously, when you have an experience like
Yeah.
that, it's some
Yeah.
people have. Um, I just yeah. I mean, I think it's a lot different probably if you're in like a hospital setting and you're kind of induced into a thing where maybe subconsciously you're prepared for death in some ways, and
Mhm.
you're already on medication. So maybe you said like the COVID patients, they're in this state where maybe they're
Safe place. Yeah.
consciously more prepared for death
Yeah.
rather than just being like thrown into death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Could
I'm not
you?
saying. Yeah. Go on.
No, no, sorry, no, carry on.
Yeah, no, I'd just say that absolutely we're here to have the human experience. Absolutely, we're not here to die before our time. And but I'm also conscious that if we are taken, then maybe that was always in the design, or whether it was. But
Hmm.
one of my friends has committed suicide recently, and super sad, because I really think that the medicines that we have access to now absolutely could have saved him, and I think he didn't have access to that, and he didn't reach
Yeah.
out, and all his friends knew he was depressed, but you just think that you never think it will come to that, but unless we do
No.
in on friends, and we do like make that effort, and then this tragedy happens, and I just think that we're living now in a world that really is avoidable, and I think that there are no magic bullets, but I think care of everyone around you, realizing that you can lose people just like that, and it's so easy to be here one day and gone the next. And I think we all live in this immortal fashion, like we think that life's here forever, and it's not. It's so short, and we only live for 1,000 months,
No.
um, and that's if we live until we're 83.
Oh,
So
well, that's crazy.
yeah, it is. It's really crazy.
Could you just, for anybody listening, could you explain Holotechnica in a bit more detail? Actually, what you're doing, what you're planning to do with it?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
I mean, we glaze over some of it now, but obviously I know about it, but the listeners aren't going to
Yeah,
know.
yeah, sure. I mean, I guess that it's come out of a lot of my work in the sense that I've come from a background in technology. I've been looking at plant medicines for a very long time, and I've realized that, it's not even my idea, but there's something called moist media where we're combining virtual reality with
Hmm.
psychedelics. And that's just one example. There's lots of people now doing virtual reality therapy with ketamine infusions because people are like getting, there's a lot of money going into ketamine research for depression, and there's a lot of labs in New York or
Yes.
wherever that are actually putting you into a VR headset so that you're having a guided journey whilst on the ketamine. And again, that sounds a bit to me like a replacement for a therapist, which I absolutely don't agree with. I think that you need therapists there as well. I think that there are
Hmm.
therapists. So then you've got the three
Yeah.
modalities. You've got the therapy, you've got the VR, and you've got the medicine. So I think that it comes out of understanding that you have always three parts to any journey, any medicine journey. You don't just have the plant, which is one third of it. You also have the set and the setting. And the set is, your mindset. Like, what state are you in? And we also know how important
Yes.
that is to any
Yeah.
journey. If you're in a bad place, almost always these plant medicines are amplifiers of that state. So then you also have the setting, and the big problem with the clinical trials is that you don't have a good setting. You have a hospital setting. It's not authentic. It's not the kind of place. It's not nature.
Yes.
They do their best to pimp it out with like pictures and certain sounds or whatever, and make it look like a forest or whatever. But it's not, and it's not. And so I think that even in the
Yeah.
traditional medicines, in the traditional clinical trials, they're already doing a form of holotechnica in the sense that they're looking at architecture, they're looking at the effect of the therapist. There's personality issues with therapists that you may be incompatible with a therapist, but yet you're still going through this very personal, very
Hmm.
intimate journey. So obviously everything's all about combinations. We're living in this, but I'm trying to just formulate it a little bit more and saying, and again, there's other groups trying to do this. Jamie Will talks about flow genomics, and he talks about stacking in the sense of, breath work with some, meditation can lead to these ecstatic 5-MeO like states, and you're reaching them in an
Yeah.
analog way. You've got people like Stanislav Grof, who in the 60s, he took some, he created holotropic breath work. He didn't really, it's already existed from the East, but he's now branded it. It's now called now called Stanislav Grof breath, a bit like Wim Hof. Wim Hof doesn't do, it's
Yeah.
like, everyone's got their own platform, everyone's got a website. Now you've got your own breath
Hmm.
technique, it's mad. So I think that what I'm trying to do with Holotechnica is actually say, look, we can turn this into a science. We can say that, you know, people like I had one of my most profound experiences by standing on a Shakti mat, which is a bed of nails, and then doing holotropic breath work.
I have one.
Yeah. So it's like, again, a very different combination, but it could lead to massive breakthroughs. So I think that
Hmm.
it's about citizen science. It's about getting people to, and there's a brilliant group on Reddit called Rift into the Mind where people are doing moist media. So they're trying different VR experiences, trying different psychedelics, different dissociatives, and then saying, ooh, what works with what? And then they're basically giving other people. And of course, it's so complicated because what works for one person may never work for another. And not only that, you've got the gender
Yes.
differences, you've got the age differences, you've got cultural differences, you name it. So it's a huge gold mine and a hugely problematic sort of subject to try and breach. But I think it's like, why not? That's what that's what I'm here to try and do, the really tough stuff.
Who are you doing this with?
So it's born out of the Cyberdelics Society primarily because with the
Okay.
Cyberdelics Society we specifically focused on not just technology but mainly technology that's digital because it's cyber, right? So it's either dependent on the internet, it's either dependent on electricity. You've got other things like technodelics, which is like anything from external world that can create an altered state. So that can include dance, can include all the other stuff. So Holotechnica is like an evolution of these groups. You've got psychotechnologies. I'll share you the link to the UCL talk where I go into a lot more detail because it's an hour plus long talk specifically about Holotechnica and where it came from, who's invited, which is everyone. It's like, you're going to be the first. You in Sydney, you're going to be the first in the door. But yeah, it's something that we are very passionate about, creating these frameworks and actually just creating best practice. And it's going to take a lot of different groups, because I mentioned the gender differences, the age differences. So it's a bit like field studies instead of the clinical studies. Clinical studies are amazing, and stuff at Imperial is amazing, but it's slow, it's expensive, it takes, you can't do it during lockdown, because you can't run clinical trials during lockdown, etc. So it's something that I think is timely. I think that a lot of people people can message me, get on board. Like, it's about doing this stuff together in a citizen science fashion.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
You say with lockdown, it's affecting it. Is that affecting your work outside of this, like your actual day-to-day work?
I'm not
or
really.
Are you able to just carry on?
Yeah, I'm. This is again why I'm a bit like I'm the person that's conscious that I'm already in the matrix, even though I'm warning people about being in the matrix. I'm sort of building the matrix, and I'm like, I'm kind of my own worst enemy in some ways, but I'm also like, that's the good thing about research. It's like so it takes other people to say to me, "Oh, but Carl, aren't you uploading your consciousness?" And then I'm like, "Oh my God, got a good point." So it's like, that's why it's so important to be in dialogue with people like yourselves, that you actually learn through talking about what you're doing. You break out of your own siloed thinking, and you have people ask you interesting and pertinent questions, and then you're like, and then you
allows you to reflect. Yeah,
exactly. And that's the ultimate Holotechnica: conversation, being in dialogue, dialogos. And this is from Greek, the Greeks, and we've been in understanding that it's only in dialogue that you really evolve your humanity and your thinking and your behavior. And people are reflectors. It's like, Jose, I don't know if you checked out human design. Human design's an interesting area where
what's this?
So human design is a bit like, you put in your birth date. It tells you whether I think that the options are that you can be a generator, a manifesting generator, a projector, or a mirror. And the most rare of all are mirrors. So these are the people that sort of reflect you, and they'll show you all your shit, and they show you your backstage, and they show you where you're going wrong. And they're really kind of, and Jose, who I work with, he's a mirror, right? And I'm a manifesting generator, which is about 30% of the population, where you are able to manifest realities. You're both generating ideas, and you're also manifesting them. And then you've got the generators, the manifestors rather, that are very good at thinking stuff through, but don't really generate it. So that's and then there's something called.
Is that not everybody though? I mean, everybody creates their own reality, right? I mean,
of course, but I think it's an interesting thing to just look at it. And I mean, it's kind of, it's only on your birth date. It doesn't depend on your time or your location. So obviously it's very broad, but I definitely feel like I'm learning something from that, in the sense that me and Jose have this dynamic where I get a bit annoyed because he's a bit passive aggressive, but now I understand where that comes from, because he's a mirror. And I'm always going, "Oh man, you're constantly going on at me," but he's doing it out of love a lot of the time, and he's like, he calls me out when I miss meetings, and and all the rest of it. So I think that we learn from each other, and it's all about combinations, in the sense of, you are your environment, you are your friends, you are the people you hang out with. It's very important that you don't waste your time, because you're literally driving the point of view to access the field of view. So you will, even if you spend a day with somebody, you get to be them afterwards in death state. Yeah. That's my theory. Yeah. All of the caveat to all
this sounds actually.
Yeah, caveat to all of this is all just.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, it's all just my opinion, right? I'm only responsible for what I say, not for what you understand. Don't take any of this as gospel. Go and do the experiments for yourself.
Well, that's a beautiful thing. I feel having a platform like this is, I get a chance to hear and experience so many other people's experiences and opinions on things. So, and there's not one right way. So whether, that's it. You're not gospel, I'm not gospel, and whatever everybody says are different parts to take from.
Yeah, exactly.
I just going back to what you said a minute ago, it sounds, it reminds me a bit of the, the big 5 personality traits, where I think is it the ocean model, which is developed in the 80s, and it's for extroversion, agreeableness, openness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism. But then it's not the way that we think of those words being, but there are certain personality traits that apparently people are kind of develop throughout life, and you fit into certain aspects of these. And what you were saying there, just reminds me of that. It's very, very interesting. I've just started reading up quite a bit about it recently after my friend pointed out that I had some certain qualities that maybe I wasn't aware that I had that weren't good, or some of them were good, some of them weren't, and it allowed me to self-reflect.
I think that's the key, right? That we always want to improve, even if we have these bad habits that we're not even aware of, because we're lying to ourselves about them. That's why we have these mirrors and these opportunities to reflect. And people say, "Oh, you never change." Leopard never changes its spots. Bullshit. I think we absolutely have the chance to change, and I think it's that narrative that's the problem. These stories we tell ourselves limit us, and we need to break out of that stuff.
I think people don't want to accept that they can change.
Yeah, they don't. They don't, absolutely. And I think that,
so therefore they don't.
Yeah, exactly. People are lazy, like we talked about. There's a lot of apathy, and there's a lot of there's a lot of pressure on all of us as well. Like, especially now when we're not sure whether we're going to be in work, or whether we're going to be able to survive, or whether we have family that dies around us. The pressures we thought the pressures were bad before, and now we're it's all ramped up 1,000 times. So yeah, man. Have you got any more questions? Because I haven't got much more time, and then we should have a third round of this, because I just love talking to you. It just flows so well every time.
Yes, mate. I'm pretty good. I mean, we've done over an hour, and time is of the essence. So I've got plenty more there's an infinite number of questions for an infinite number of times. So we'll do round 3 for sure. Who knows? Hopefully it would be nice to do it in person. If not, then this is just as good.
Yeah, well, let's make sure that we do that, and I'll tune in next week for Chris's show, and I'm really intrigued to see what you get out of him.
Great.
And he's a great guy, and super switched on as well. So let's keep talking, and love you, man. Love your show. Keep doing the great work, and let's keep chatting.
And you, mate. Thank you.
Pleasure, mate.
Yeah, speak to you soon. Thank you. Thank you very much for tuning in. You've been listening or watching to Shift Your Perspective. This was episode 21, and that was Carl H. Smith. Carl is always an interesting guest. Definitely going to have him on the podcast again. He is a scientist and a researcher, and I will put in the description a number of links to the talks that he's done and the projects that he is on. You can check him out on various other podcasts, and he's got a lot of talks online that you can watch. So please stay tuned for our next episode. Next week, we will be having Chris Timmerman, who is a world-renowned scientist who works also in the UK, and I will post some more things on him in the upcoming days. Thank you very much.